High Chief Ulamak. Adventure level, not available. Orc. Kokenian.
Fuck you with a pike, orc!
King Laughin spat. He then crumpled the document he had just read, or likely pretended to read, and threw it at my feet. Even if he didn't know how to read, the contents of the document were obvious. A call for a complete and unconditional surrender and the abdication of his throne. He stood defiantly before me, chains clinking on occasion. His own soldiers were the ones who put him in those chains, but you won't find me complaining about it. I stared at him from his own throne with a smug expression on my face. "Only if you cuddle me after, drow," I said with a sneer, then allowed a serious expression to return to my face. "Allow me to recapitulate your situation. Your armies have disbanded and returned to their duties as farmers and guards. Every single one of your cities and villages have opted to bend the knee to the United Chiefdoms, and your nobility is begging to be spared any punitive action. Some have even abdicated their titles to me to grant to whomever I see fit. It is not an exaggeration when I say that everyone in these lands recognize me as their new ruler, with the exception of you."
"And I never fucking will, you piece of—"
"Whether or not you do is vastly irrelevant," I interrupted with a growl. "Nobody gives a fuck what you think anymore. You promoted a vampire to be your master general."
"I was deceived!" Laughin shouted. "You dare to stand there and judge me as if you've never been tricked? Like anyone here has never fallen for a lie!"
The Drow King gesticulated at the gathered nobles, causing his chains to rattle. Some of them flinched, but most continued to stare at their former king with an ice-cold expression. A select few were expressing open hatred and derision. Laughin had not been a kind king, and while a lot of his cruelty had been forced on the peasantry, not even those with power had been safe from his tyranny. I'm certain most of them were actively asking the higher ones to stop him from formally surrendering. Hells, if it weren't for the Drow fearing my soldiers, there'd likely be a mob outside crying for Laughin's blood.
"Yeah, I made a vampire the commander of my armies, but he was a Drow, and Drow can't be vampires! How in all the hells was I supposed to know the bastards have figured out a way?" he demanded. "We executed his family and servants, then destroyed his holdings. If he's still alive, he has nothing left. So what more could you want?"
"I want justice!" My shout reverberated through the throne room. "Year after year after year after year, you send your damn soldiers to invade my lands. People die, but such is politics. Trying to conquer a neighbor you ignorantly believe is weaker than you is normal, understandable even. But your pet vampire crossed the line, Laughin. People didn't just die, they were turned into monstrosities." A murmur of agreement came from my own great chiefs, who were standing with the Drow nobility to watch the spectacle. Laughin turned up his nose and sucked his teeth, causing an anger to rise within me. I gripped the arm of his throne, in an attempt to control myself.
"I fail to see how that's my fault," Laughin said.
"Are you blind, then? It is your fault because you are the king!" I shouted again, rising from his throne. "Your actions and decisions led to this tragedy. If anyone else were king, if the stain of your lineage didn't exist upon this land, this never would have happened. That is why you're to blame." Laughin glared at me in silence, finally at a loss for words. I matched his glare, barely able to contain my fury at his infantile behavior. Ashamed as I am to admit it, part of me was hoping he would continue to refuse to surrender. "Draft another copy," I said to the scribe, then turned to Blagroff. "If he doesn't surrender by dusk, he is to be kept within his own dungeons and executed at dawn, after a pauper's meal. I will grant no additional quarter." "Yes, High Chief," Blagroff said.
"You won't get away with this, Ulamak!"
Laughin growled. "There's nothing to get away with, you inbred fool," I replied, as I sat down once again. Kings that refuse to gracefully surrender must be put to death for a war to end. If you had even a trace of actual royalty within you, you would know that.
The terms are...
The terms? The terms are perfectly reasonable for your crimes. Not just the crimes against my people, but those against your own as well. You won't squirm your way out of this, Laughin. You'll take accountability and renounce your crown, or you will die a criminal's death. There's nothing further to discuss. Take him back to his quarters. Laughin opened his vile mouth to shout insults or curses at me, but the guards used the opportunity to shove a muzzle rope between his teeth. His shouts became mumbles, and his chains clinked as they escorted him from the throne room, Blagroff trailing close behind. I hope he stays stubborn, Great Chief Olmec said. A murmur of agreement spread through the gathered nobles and chiefs, but I held up my hand and shook my head. Though a part of me agrees, as leaders we need to take the stance that it isn't right to wish death upon another, I said. Well, yeah, I know that, Olmec said, shuffling his feet. I believe you, but I doubt that everyone here is aware of our morality and what is expected of them moving forward. My eyes travelled over the drow nobles. Most of them shrank under my gaze, and only a few met my eyes. Those few showed no signs of hostility or resentment. Some looked grateful, even. With a small sigh, I stood from Laughin's throne and cleared my throat to give a speech. Hear this, I said loudly. Regardless of how tomorrow goes, Laughin's reign will end. As some of you know, Bolosir has released their claims, so these lands will be split amongst the unified chiefdoms and the Empire of Calcutta. I cannot and will not speak for foreign rulers, but those of you whose lands will fall under my responsibility will be allowed to keep your positions so long as you swear fealty. This will be a time of transition, though, and with transition comes tribulations. Your titles will change. Instead of dukes, we have great chiefs. Instead of counts, barons, and the like, we have chiefs. Your responsibility will remain largely the same, but the methods that you employ to carry out those responsibilities will change. The next few years will be turbulent, as you learn to do things our way, but you will be expected to lead your people with honour, competence, and dignity regardless. Any who doubt their capabilities and wish to renounce their titles are welcome to do so at any point. More murmuring came from the crowd of nobles, but no one stepped forward to abdicate. Satisfied, I took my seat once again and gestured a dismissal. The drow nobles bowed low, but the great chief simply gave a respectful nod. I had to try not to laugh at the contrast as they began to leave the throne room. Hi, Chief. Lion's voice suddenly appeared in my ear. You really shouldn't sneak up on me, Lien, I said, suppressing a start. It is difficult to refrain from reacting with violence, especially after a series of battles. Forgive me, sir, she replied, with a surprisingly serious tone. A representative from the Deep Wild Forest is here to speak with you. The disappearance of Lien's typically playful attitude made sense. Many consider the fair folk to be peaceful, strange, and limited to their homes deep within the forests. Those that are less ignorant know all too well how cataclysmic an angry Waldo can be. I can see them, I nodded gravely. The various agreements that we have with the Deep Wild Forest includes a defensive pact. However, the messenger that had informed me of the vampiric offensive against the Deep Wild had told me that they do not require my aid. My brow furrowed as I worried about whether this may have changed. No, you can't. I'm invisible, a voice said from in front of me. My guards, ignorant of what Lien had told me, immediately drew their weapons and began looking around wildly for the owner of the voice. I held up a hand to calm them. They hesitated, unsure of how to behave. Stand down, I commanded. The guards immediately snapped out of their confusion and returned to their rest positions. Ah, I didn't mean to scare them, the voice said, as a mote of light began to appear. Just thought it would be funny if you happened to say that and I happened to be invisible. Very amusing, I said, with a tight-lipped smile. Welcome, Tix. How do you fare?
My well-being is irrelevant, but you have my thanks for asking.
The mote of light grew brighter until it formed the shape of a small elf-like person. Then it dimmed slightly and the high fairy became fully visible. Its golden wings glimmered in the light and its matching hair somehow remained stationary despite the fluttering of its wings. Disturbingly green eyes met my own, and its angular features grew concerned.
I'll need them back before I go, though,
Tix said. What, your thanks? I asked.
Yes.
Oh, you can have them. What?
Hey, you can't just...
The high fairy sighed and placed its hands upon its hips.
That's not how it works, Ullamak. I have to do something that you would thank me for to get them back.
Wouldn't that make me give you my thanks, though?
Yes, but right now my thanks are your thanks. So when you give me your thanks, you're really just giving me my thanks back. I feel like it's not that hard to understand.
I see. So, what brings you here? I asked, hoping for good news.
Oh, right. I am to inform you that the threat to the Deep Wild Forest has ended. The vampires have moved on, and are currently travelling toward the unified chiefdoms.
How large is their army? I asked, alarm seeping into my voice.
12,253.
Damn. That's far too many for village defense forces to handle. We might lose a few of them before we can respond. They're moving southwest from the Deep Wild Forest, right? Tix pointed up, right, down, then left.
Yes.
Okay, I said, then turned to one of my guards. Blackturn, did you hear all of this?
Yes, sir, he replied.
Good. Find Blargruff and tell him what you've heard here. Then tell him I said to send the mountain mages. Great Chief Grun should be right behind the mages, understood?
Yes, sir. Go.
The guard took off at a run, quickly leaving the throne room to fulfill my command. The mages should be able to do some damage, but they wouldn't be able to rout the bloodsuckers by themselves. Grun's forces won't be able to do it on their own either, but the lands of Midgrath foster strong orcs. They should be able to hold off the vampires long enough for us to reinforce them.
I can make no promises, but we might be able to help,
Tix said. How? I asked.
Well, if you ask me for help, I have to tell the kings that you asked, and they will have to help. That's the agreement, right?
I was under the impression that most of your forces were tied to the forest.
Well, yeah, but that's just most. We probably won't be able to get rid of all the vampires, but we can provide at least a little bit of defense while you maneuver your forces. Probably. Not to speak out of turn, but why don't you just do that? Why make us ask?
Laughin asked with a cautious tone.
Huh? Tix asked, tilting his head. The agreement.
Our agreement with the Wilder of the Deep Wild Forest specifies that help must be requested before it can be rendered, I explained, saving the High Fairy. By their own laws, entering our territory without our explicit permission is equivalent to an invasion. They would expect reprisal. The same is true when the roles are reversed.
Oh, Laughin said.
The ages-old agreement between the Orcs and the Wilder has been revisited many times by both sides. The Defensive Pact Edition was created by my grandfather, who negotiated with Mamordabrand for 22 consecutive hours to bring it about. The King of Archfey had met his match with the stubborn old bastard, and the two became friends of a sort for the rest of my grandfather's life. The Defense Pact has since become a symbol of the friendship between the Wilder of the Deep Wild Forest and the people of the Unified Chiefdoms. It's never been invoked before, though. I've memorized the entirety of the text, as any High Chief should, but I felt a certain amount of trepidation at the thought of invoking it. 3 reasons plagued my mind. First, the Wilder had not invoked the pact when they were being attacked. If we invoke it, they could see that as a sign of incompetence or weakness. No one wants a weak or dumb ally, and their trade is good for our economy. Second, even if I understand the text of the pact perfectly as written, there is room left for interpretation. If our interpretations of the defensive pact are different, which is entirely possible between our two peoples, it could lead to disaster. In the best case scenario, we're able to come to an agreement on the various stipulations within the pact. In the worst case scenario, the consequences will be dire. Third, the pact calls for a reward given to the side that provides assistance. The reward must be agreed upon beforehand, but if they ask for something we cannot give and refuse to compromise, it will breed resentment between our people. If I had to guess, I'd say that this was likely why Mamuldraan didn't invoke the pact. 3 damn good reasons to say no to invoking the pact. Unfortunately, the reason to say yes was much heftier. It could save the lives of those under my protection. Even if I have to fight tooth and claw, or negotiate for days on end, I have a duty to my people to keep them safe. Okay, Tix. I wish to invoke the defensive pact, I said solemnly. Please ask Mamuldraan what reward it would seek for its aid in protecting my people.
Oh, you two are going to have me running back and forth all day, aren't you?
Tix laughed, trying to lighten the mood.
Ah, yes. The life of a messenger is a rough one sometimes,
Laughin added with a chuckle.
Messenger? Small orc, I'm not a messenger. I'm a high fairy. But you deliver messages all the time. Well, yes, but... No, I'm not.
Tix trailed off, thinking deeply for a moment.
Oh, the Stonebirth bastards. When did the fuckers trick me into becoming a messenger?
We all stared at the fuming High Fairy for a moment, wondering if it was serious or playing a prank. Well, the first time I saw you deliver a message was when I was a child, I said. And are you not the one who invited my grandfather to negotiate with Mamuldraan?
So the whole time then?
Tix asked with a deep frown.
This whole time I've been a messenger?
I guess so.
I don't want to be a messenger. I'm important, damn it.
Messengers are important, Tix.
Oh, you know damn well what I mean, Ulamak. Important like one of your chiefs, not important like a shit shoveler.
Well, if it helps, I've always considered you to be more of a diplomat than a messenger. Gruz, one of my guards, added. Diplomats deliver messages all the time, but they're very important representatives of their nations. The High Fairy turned to look at Gruz, as if the burly orc had just saved its life with an unbelievably heroic act.
A diplomat, you say?
Actually, Gruz is right, I interjected. Your role is closer to that of a diplomat than a messenger. Laughin even introduced you as a representative of the Deep Wild Forest, remember? Tix crossed its arms and nodded slowly, then smiled smugly. It opened its mouth to speak, but suddenly froze. The High Fairy's eyes rolled to face the back of his head, and a slight shudder passed through its body. Laughin gasped, but I held up a hand to soothe her, having seen this happen before. Tix recovered from this state quickly, and looked at me with a bashful expression. What did Mamuldraan say? I asked.
Well, it wasn't just Mamuldraan,
Tix replied, playing with his hands.
But yeah, the King of Hi-Fi wants to bring Nick, Nash, and York Alter to you as commanded by the Higher Ones.
The Higher Ones? Laughin asked.
What?
That's fine, I said, interrupting the scout. Though I doubt my consent is a matter of importance. What else is there?
The vampires have disappeared. The King of the Bone Fairies, Hul, was watching them from a safe distance, and reports that they have simply vanished.
What? I asked. They're gone?
Yes.
So, does that mean my people are safe?
I guess so.
Tix shrugged.
I feel that vampires disappearing is pretty concerning, though.
Could they have turned invisible like you did?
No. Sash tricks wouldn't work on normal Wilder, let alone a king. If Hall says they're gone, they're gone.
But how?
I don't know, but we'll do what we can to find out,
Tix said, with an uncharacteristically serious tone.
No promises, of course.
Before I could say anything else, a vortex of inexplicable energies appeared behind Tix. My guards were quick to come to arms, but once again I waved them off. Portals to the fair realm were not unknown to me either.
Oh, they're here already, Tix said happily.
The vortex vanished, and in its place stood 4 people who were holding hands. It took but a moment before I recognized Nick, Nash, and York. The 4th being, likely an archfey, was unknown to me. It released Nash's hand and stepped back.
"This is where we part ways," it said. "May fortune find you."
"You too, Algebron," York said with a nod.
"Wait for me,"
Tix said, then turned to me.
"Well, time for me to go."
"Be well, Tix," I said with a smile. The High Fairy and I locked eyes awkwardly for a few moments. "Oh, shit, right," I said, remembering the beginning of our conversation. "You have my thanks for keeping me appraised of current events."
"You're welcome."
Tix fluttered over to Algebron and sat on its shoulder. Another vortex formed around the pair of Walder, then disappeared with a pop. The 3 Outer Boys looked around for a moment, then bowed to me one by one. "Welcome to the Night Kingdom, brothers of the Outer Clan," I said, with a grin at their surprise. "Thank you, High Chief," York replied. "Congratulations on your victory."
"And thank you."
My grin widened. "So, what have you been up to?"